The day of the siege had finally dawned. We had arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, and we were as ready as we could be. Many armies bearing different banners and colors watched over the grounds before the castle, ready to rush in and lay waste to the Demon Lord and the remainder of his forces. All of us shared a common enemy, and upon his demise would all finally know some form of peace. Even during the roll call of the major generals, the air became full of determination and pride.
Mirth! Avarice! Nadia! Fiorna! Aradum!
Each name called became a mark on history. This was the war to bring freedom or destruction to the demon world. If the rebellion didn't win this fight, then this war would never end. If the rebellion won, then the world would become united in a hopefully peaceful rule as long as assassinations weren't attempted. The hour before the battle was set to take place. My thoughts instantly ran back to our final meeting in Lilith Castle. Diana had pulled the leaders and us together, instructing us on how exactly to proceed.
Zero, you will be joining Shadow and Sergeant in the front, taking care of the main army head-on. I expect that you will come out of it alive.
Yes, my lady.
Rabbit, Faye, you are in charge of range attacks and defense. We cannot allow any of those blasted imps getting to us from behind.
Yes, ma'am!
As Diana looked at me, I grew slightly fearful. I had to get into the Demon Lord's castle, but how exactly did Diana plan on getting me there?
You and your fiancé will take the side route straight to the castle.
Wait, huh?
We've organized our army to have our strongest on the front lines and against the tree line, giving us a side route for you to make your way straight to the castle.
If anything trickles into the side route, you'll be able to handle it. However, there is something I must ask of you.
What is it?
If you are indeed attacked, you need to defend your fiancé the entire way there. Do not let him use his energy.
Are you out of your mind?
When you get to the castle, I will be fighting one-on-one with the Demon Lord. If something should happen to me, then I need you to take over. She is not ready to fight him, and you need to be at full strength to finish him off.
I think I gave him some energy last night.
The humans should be able to handle a few imps.
Hey! Well, compliments are just flying out of Shadow's mouth these days. I stared, listening and reaffirming the order. I couldn't lie, I was nervous. However, I was determined enough to see this through. I looked over at my fiancé with a confident smile. I got this. Don't worry. Despite the worried look in his eyes, he nodded and held my hand, trusting me in my decision to agree with Diana's command. Diana rolled her shoulders and looked at the map draped over the war table between us all. Her gaze pierced into the parchment as the aura around her body pulsated in anger.
I will fly ahead and meet the Demon Lord head-on. No matter what happens, I will not allow that monster to live.
The pure determination and anger in her voice practically sent a shiver down my spine. She was set on seeing this through to the end, and I was sure that she was willing to even die if it meant taking the Demon Lord with her. The remaining incubi and the wives were asked to stay behind the army and guard the main base, where Rabbit and Faye were stationed. They needed as many eyes as possible in the back of the battle, so the four couples were perfect to keep things in check. As they agreed, the meeting ended and the mental preparation had begun. The idea of the upcoming battle scared me, sending waves of fear and worry up and down my body in response to the thought.
So, my warrior princess, are you ready?
That is so freaking cute. I want to say yes, but I'm scared. Erik gave me a comforting smile and gently leaned down and kissed my cheek, wrapping his arms around me softly.
I promise. I will protect you from anything that comes our way.
I listened to him speak before nodding, taking in a deep breath. Everything would be okay. We would be fine. I had to believe in myself and get us to the castle when the time was right. Like a beacon, our forces became the banner of hope and strength for the rebellion. At the sight of Diana, many soldiers bowed or stared in awe and inspiration. Maybe it was her presence, or maybe it was for what she stood for. But as Diana stood at the cliffside of the mountain, the air became full of energy and power. My fiancé, Rabbit, Faye, and I stood behind her as Diana stood on the ledge of the cliffside, addressing the rebellion for their final battle. Her voice echoed across the field, booming and reverberating through the air like thunder.
Milites! Et hoc liberati isturei tramcun tuis omnibus conversiris! Sto vobiscum reducitic vos ad spem, nocte, lavabir mur, arcem, ostium sanguine!
What is she saying?
She said that she will help them gain their freedom, and she will stand with them as they fight this war.
Is that all?
Well, she also said that the castle will be bathed in blood, but I don't believe she means it literally.
Ah. I nodded as I stared at the back of Diana's head. A part of me felt a little intimidated and jealous of the power she had. She really could make armies bow to her and obey her every whim. At the same time, I knew that she was doing the right thing for this world.
Ele Dio dominati sun nostri, nostre struet, eo mitere, profundissimum, inferni detractos.
Rabbit and Faye stepped forward and held their hands out towards the castle, focusing their energies and forcing the stone walls around it to crumble and dissolve down into the earth. Diana summoned her saber, letting it shine brilliantly as the purple taint over her skin began to twist and turn. Before my eyes, the taint on her back took shape, lifting off of Diana's skin and morphed into a set of demonic wings. I could only stare, jaw dropped, as Diana's body lifted off of the ground and began to fly over the legions, slowly gliding towards the castle.
To war! To battle!
At her final command, Diana's wings pulsated in the air, flapping gracefully as she swooped down and forward. She was charging and flying for the castle walls, saber bared and ready to spill blood. As the armies below began to bellow and march forward, Rabbit took hold of my shoulder and turned me away from the castle to face her.
Come, we must hurry.
Hey, Eric's back in his demon form. Looking good, boo. Understanding the need for urgency, I nodded and rushed forward with the rest of the Incubi towards the slope down the mountainside.
Everything is in order. Sergeant Diana's guard are at the front lines, while Shadow is with his legion to the west.
Is our route clear?
We've done what we can to keep your way clear. We'll try to make sure the battle won't break through the path.
I nodded, feeling the need to rush Nip at my heels, pushing me forward. My fiancé seemed to agree, gripping my hand and walking at my pace alongside me. However, as we finally arrived at the forest line, Faye and Rabbit stopped, looking back at us.
Straight through here. The sound of the war will always be on your right, so do not get lost.
I can't wait to use my shadow magic to fight these imps this time and see how it goes.
You'll be fine, though. Just follow the tree line.
In sync, my fiancé and I nodded in acknowledgement before turning to see the other brothers and their wives. So, this is it.
Remember your surroundings and protect each other.
Aw, James. This is making me sad. Last time we were here, we were with James. Bleh.
Be careful, alright? Make sure you stay safe.
Thanks, Iridessa.
Kick his dead body a couple times for me, alright? Right in the head.
We'll be right here rooting for you and watching your back, okay?
We'll finish this and rush in as soon as we can, alright?
Make sure you kick some serious ass. Show that old goat what he gets for messing with you.
We'll win this. We know we can.
You can do this. We'll see you soon, okay?
I smiled, despite the nerves running through my body. I held on to my fiancé's hand and gave it a hard squeeze before receiving one back in kind. We'll finish this, then we'll go home. The group nodded before I slowly turned and looked into the tree line. Took a breath and rushed forward. Matching my speed, my love followed, weaving through the trees behind me to not lose sight of me. The journey was surprisingly uninterrupted. The sound of the war clashed beside us, causing me to cover my ears a bit from the volume, but I shook my head and pressed forward, not wanting to become distracted. The goal was to get to the castle. I had to focus. Before I could, however, I was pulled back by my fiancé, barely missing an arrow fly past my nose. Whoa! I quickly turned my head and spotted a small group of imps creeping towards me, with one reloading his bow with another arrow. I quickly grabbed my incubus and focused on making us become one with the shadows of the tree we were under. As the dark consumed our bodies, I felt my energy pulse from the amount being used. Still, I successfully dragged us both into the shadow plane.
What? This is new.
Welcome. I looked back at him and smiled with a nod, knowing that he was completely unaware of what I had learned in my training. After all, he had been focusing on improving himself. I lowered my hand to his and grasped it, rushing forward and pulling him along. He managed to trip a bit before following along, keeping my pace. Even as some hideaway scouts and trickling soldiers came in our path, we simply ran through them unseen. It took the man behind me a bit to take it in, but he quickly adjusted, knowing that now wasn't the time to focus on that. I, however, felt my energy quickly drain. I was maintaining 2 people in the shadow plane after all. It only made sense that it used more energy. Still, I wanted to get as far as I could before returning to the real world. I gripped onto my incubus's hand hard as I began to wane, slowing my run and feeling a heavy wave of dizziness consume my mind. Soon enough, warmth returned to my body, and we were both sent back to the corporeal demon world. Of course, it couldn't have been a perfect straight journey without a couple of final guards at the edge of the tree line waiting for us. A band of remaining imps caught my eye, taking in that I had successfully maneuvered around their lines and had reached them. I grimaced and glared at the imps, seeing the group of 3 rush at us despite the weak feeling in my knees. However, I had one last trick up my sleeve. I focused on my shadow, commanding it to come forth and defend me. My incubus and the imps gasped as a dark, shadowy figure of me sprouted from the ground and formed a large sword in her hand. I glared at the imps and pointed at them, feeling my energy quickly drained once again. Get them. On my command, my shadow rushed forward and began to slice through the imps, effectively disconnecting their limbs from their bodies and cutting them open. That sound. Each tried to block, but only managed to have their attacks phase through my shadow like mist. They couldn't touch me, but I could kill them. I smirked as my shadow quickly zipped between them in figure 8s, ripping each of them apart before letting them fall to the ground, bleeding out and wailing in pain. That was all I could do before my energy finally forced my shadow back into the ground, a wave of exhaustion rolling through my body. I began to fall forward, exhausted. My fiancé, however, quickly rushed forward and caught me in his arms.
Whoa! Princess, are you okay?
Huh? I looked up to see Erik staring down at me with a deeply concerned gaze. We were safe for the moment, so I merely smiled up at him with a nod. I'm fine. I promised to protect you, like you protect me. Erik let out a small laugh, kissing my forehead and hugging me to him.
You spoil me so much, my love.
I hugged him back, feeling relief that we had finally arrived at the castle and were about to rush inside. As we slowly pulled away, Erik lifted me up and helped me to my feet.
Will you be all right?
I nodded, shaking off the exhaustion from my mind. I was ready to end this. I looked up at the castle gates and felt a rush of determination run through me. Let's go finish this. With that, Erik and I rushed forward into the castle. The final battle had begun. Erik and I rushed into the castle and into the main hall, where we could hear Diana and the Demon Lord clashing swords.
I will tear you to shreds!
Sounds like something intense is happening in here. As we finally entered the space where the battle was happening, we stopped at the doorway, spotting Diana slamming her saber over and over onto the Demon Lord's sword, which was held over his head like a shield. From the look of it, the Demon Lord was severely wounded and was trying to hold out against Diana's barrage of blows. Diana wasn't looking too well herself, but she seemed to have the upper hand. What was scary was that Diana's face was completely smeared with blood, intensifying the frightening look of rage and anger in her eyes. Every swing was reckless, powerfully thrown to eventually hack into the Demon Lord. To her displeasure, the Demon Lord was able to block each time. Erik and I slowly stepped in, watching as Diana continued to beat steel to steel in an angry rage, trying to find an opening, and becoming more enraged with each block the Demon Lord pulled. Slowly, his body began to glow, pulsing with red energy. Right, so this time that Angel of Stone Destiny isn't taking over her body, so this will be interesting.
Enough!
With a blast of red lightning, Diana was sent flying back, slamming against a pillar and falling to the ground with a thud. Ah! Diana! I'm like, probably shouldn't be making our presence aware, but okay, I'll scream out her name. The Demon Lord seemed to ignore my shout as he stood and began to walk over towards Diana's fallen body. Diana tried to press up onto her hands, stumbling and buckling a bit, before she glared up at the Demon Lord while he approached.
I should have waited until you came back, so I could have killed all of you in one fell swoop.
Ow. Diana's glare intensified as large black and purple flames engulfed her body from the rage that ignited within her.
You bastard!
Pouncing off of the ground, Diana formed a new saber in her hand and flew at the Demon Lord, swinging it to slice his throat open. However, the Demon Lord parried, locking steel once more with her and leaning in with a hard glare of his own.
How does it feel to be the only one left alive in your family? Not even your unborn sister survived!
Funny that you should mention her just now. Diana snarled as she slammed her feet into the Demon Lord's chest, forcing him back and causing her to catch herself on her wings remaining in the air. The voice that erupted from Diana's mouth sent shivers down my spine.
You don't even deserve the mercy of death!
Erik instinctively placed an arm in front of me, staying put and watching intently. Both of us were sure that Diana possibly had this, but we didn't want to get in the way of her rage if she was full out going berserk. The Demon Lord let out a laugh before pointing his hand at Diana, summoning a large bolt of red lightning to shoot out and slam into Diana. Luckily, Diana had placed her sword between them and blocked the lightning from hitting her skin. Still, she was slammed back into the pillar she had before and held there against a stream of heavy red lightning.
You're losing your power, succubus! Just like your weak parent!
With a tearful scream, Diana began to push back, shaking and gritting her teeth. The wounds on her body began to bleed profusely, but she eventually sent a wave of purple flame-like energy into her sword, and letting it climb up the lightning bolt into the Demon Lord's hand. The Demon Lord quickly pulled his hand away, revealing a sizzling and burning aura around his palm and fingers. Diana, weakened, fell to her knees, exhausted but not out yet. Her eyes still bore into her enemy, not ready to give up. Whoa. And then Erik enters the fray. More purple. I felt myself glare hard at the Demon Lord. He was a monster that needed to be stopped. Erik, feeling my anger, stepped forward and began to summon his ethereal tendrils behind his back and around his form.
Guess it's time to step in.
I watched as Erik rushed forward and planted his feet beside Diana, reeling his hands back and punching them forward. As he did, a crown of tendrils shot up from the ground around his body and flew at the Demon Lord like a spray of arrows. Ah, Erik's going up against his dad! So exciting. The Demon Lord glared and sliced each attack out of the way, panting from exhaustion, but not ready to surrender. As he sliced through the last one, he sneered at his second son, gritting his teeth.
You!
Erik smirked, licking his lips slightly.
Did you miss me, father?
Huh. As he finished this sentence, Erik formed another round of spikes behind him and shot them towards his father, glaring as he blocked and knocked away each one again with his sword. The Demon Lord let out a dark chuckle.
Like I would miss little insect traitors like you.
The Demon Lord let out a howl before slamming his giant sword into the floor, causing the ground to quake and a large crack to cut through the marble and charge at Erik's position. Erik jumped into the air and landed beside the broken earth, sending out another volley of spikes. Luckily, one rammed into the Demon Lord's shoulder, causing him to shout in pain.
Losing your touch, aren't you?
The Demon Lord snarled before ripping the spike out from his body, letting the wound bleed openly before rushing at his son with his sword held high. However, Diana swooped in and slammed her saber into the path of his sword, forming a deadlock.
I'm not finished with you!
Diana and the Demon Lord pushed against each other, eventually jumping away from each other in aggravation. As Diana landed beside Erik, he stepped in and pointed his hands to the ground, where his tendrils burrowed through the marble and jutted out like a spike trap. The Demon Lord was quick to react, rushing back before the spikes impaled him from below and glared. This match had become an unfair fight for him, but in our case, it was needed to finish him off at last.
Just as cocky as your mother! No wonder she was my least favorite.
Ooh, that's uncalled for. Erik suddenly grew a dark face, the tendrils in his body glowing in a red misty aura. Something snapped in Erik's emotions and the Demon Lord triggered it.
Don't worry. I'll send you to a place where you'll never have to see her again.
Erik and the Demon Lord then simultaneously rushed forward at each other, with the Demon Lord raising his sword high, and Erik moving his tendrils to wrap around his blade. Erik and the Demon Lord went into a deadlock, with the Demon Lord trying to cut through the hold his tendrils had on his sword. Erik, however, formed more free tendrils and shot them up at the Demon Lord from below, causing his father to release his sword and jump back, now unarmed. Erik smirked as his tendrils snapped the sword in half with insane ease and tossed the two halves to the side to be forgotten. I watched in anxiousness, hoping this battle would end soon. It was 2 against 1. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I, however, kept my distance to make sure he wouldn't attack me instead. I had no energy to fight. Taking in what Erik had done to his weapon, the Demon Lord snarled,
I can beat you even without my sword! Remember who raised you, boy!
Erik let out a large bark of a laugh as his tendrils sharpened into spikes once again.
I'm afraid you're mistaken. My mother raised me. You were too busy doting on your favorite son to care about me or the others.
Damn straight. The Demon Lord growled, his fists becoming engulfed in red bolts of lightning.
I created you! You owe your very existence to me.
I owe you nothing!
The Demon Lord only laughed before suddenly gasping from pain. I had barely seen what had happened, but as I stared at the Demon Lord, I gasped at the sight. Protruding from the Demon Lord's chest were a spray of red spikes dripping with his blood. I could barely keep staring as he turned and looked to us in shock. I looked over to Erik to see him pointing at the wall behind the Demon Lord, where a collection of spikes jutted through a black void into the Demon Lord's back, effectively skewering him.
You never paid attention. You were blinded by pride, and that will be your downfall.
No! He's mine!
Erik quickly pulled back his tendrils from his father's body, causing the Demon Lord to fall forward from the pain and momentum. Diana, however, swooped at the Demon Lord and rammed her saber into his chest, a garbled gasp escaping his throat. Without hesitating, Diana pulled her sword out and stabbed him once again, driving her blade all of the way through him to the hilt and snarling into his face.
Those were for my parents.
A third stab directly through the heart for the sister.
For my sister!
Diana finally pulled her sword out and rammed the pommel into the side of his head, pushing him down to the ground in a lifeless thud. He was dead by now, eyes glazed over in death's cold, breathless embrace. However, Diana didn't care. Diana quickly straddled his waist, bringing up her saber and using her magic to shorten to a dagger in her hands above her head.
And for every life you took from this world!
Oh boy. Somebody's gotta stop her. All that noise. Ugh. Maddened, Diana began to violently slam and pepper stabs into the Demon Lord's chest. Erik rushed over and wrapped his arm around me, covering me from the sight, but he was unable to block the sound of Diana's sob-filled screams with each stab. I became a bit frightened at Diana and how she was releasing her anger. However, it was entirely justified. He had taken everything from her, and had caused worldwide chaos. It was only natural to demand revenge even after death. This was her last stand with him, and she had dominated his very corpse with her blade, uncaring of the lost spirit no longer within it. It went on for far too long, to the point where Erik had to let me go and walked forward, pulling Diana off of him. She began to flail, dropping her knife and letting it fade as it hit the ground into nothing.
No! Let go!
Diana!
It's enough! Erik pulled Diana to her feet and gripped her shoulders, shaking her and glaring into her eyes.
Enough!
Diana's eyes were bloodshot, desperate to keep striking the dead body, but filled with emotion and broken inhibition. As she finally took in Erik's words, she shut her eyes and dropped to her knees, releasing a wave of sobs and cries. I walked over to Erik's side, pitying Diana. She must have seen so much death. This was her solace and chance to let go. To know her family was gone because of him wrenched pain into my heart, but I knew that it was finally over. They were avenged, and so were the many people who died under his hand. The Demon Lord was dead at last. I felt a weight lift off of my heart and spirit, proving to me that the curse was broken, and that the chain that bound me to the Abyssal Plains was gone. I could go home. I hugged Erik's arm to me, finally letting out the sigh I was holding in relief of the situation. Erik smiled and kissed my head.
It's over now.
Yeah. We can go home now. A wave of joy rushed through my body, happy to know that I was free to go home. I began to become overjoyed with the idea of returning, walking across the aisle and marrying Erik before returning to my normal life. Life in the demon world sure was an adventure, but it was time to finish this and leave. I smiled to Erik before kneeling down and placing a hand on Diana's shoulder as she cried, causing her to look up at me. I could only smile at her, try to relieve some of the heartache and burden she was releasing. It's over, Diana. We won. A small breath of silence ran through the air before Diana wiped the tears from her eyes and nodded, still shaky from the experience.
It's over.
I nodded and gently helped Diana stand before taking Eric's hand and walking towards the entrance of the hall. Diana, however, turned back to look at the Demon Lord's body, stopping us in our tracks.
Was this all worth it? I lost my family because of him. There was so much bloodshed.
Diana tightened a fist at her side, gritting her teeth and shutting her eyes.
I didn't get to say goodbye to my family. My sister.
I felt another wave of empathy run through my body at her words. She wasn't really alone, though. She had Saro. He was truly everything she had left in the world, and he was more than willing to walk through it with her. It was all right, so I reached out to take her shoulder. Diana looked over, seeing the comfort in my eyes despite her broken gaze. Before I could speak, however, a familiar purple light glowed from the Demon Lord's body, catching our eyes and causing us all to look over in shock. What was happening? What the...